Hello and welcome everyone to this episode of the Meaningful Communication Show. I'm your host, Chad Eaves, and today we are joined by a very special guest, my friend and colleague, Michael Gansl, who is a business coach in New York. He is the seasoned voice of reason. His consulting company is the Voice of Reason Consulting. He's been at this for over 3 decades and has some really interesting insights, perspectives, experiences, and great stories that I've really enjoyed learning and listening to since we met each other last year during COVID. It's a really good example of connecting with people and getting to know each other. He's also been involved in startups, had an IT company called Netland that generated $18 million in sales. And today we'll probably touch on some of that. And if you'd like to contact him, his LinkedIn account and his company's website will be in the show notes below. So be sure to check that. And so if you're looking for any advice or perspective on sales, marketing, business coaching, reach out and ask him and contact him and see what you might be able to do together. Earlier, we are going to discuss an article that Michael shared with me called 14 Amazon Leadership Principles. And it's pretty interesting. It's written from the perspective of a software engineer, which in a prior life I actually used to do for a number of organizations. And so this is going to be an interesting conversation. So Michael, what attracted you to the article?
Well, hi, Chad, and thanks for the introduction. And I'm really enjoying being here. Excuse me. So I just want to amplify, we met in a networking meeting over Zoom during COVID. And I realized, I think we both realized that we had so much in common, despite the fact you're in Chicago, I'm in New York, despite the fact you're a Midwest guy and I'm an East Coast guy. We don't want to get into politics because we don't want to go there. But, we realized we had so much in common and we started talking our own. And basically, I consider us work buddies. Every 2 weeks or so, we have a conversation. We talk about sales, marketing, business issues, what's going on with me, what's going on with you, a little bit of the personal. And it's been terrific. And it's been great. And now you've invited me to the podcast, and that's terrific. I really appreciate it. So actually, you asked me the question of like the 14 Amazon leadership principles. How did I get to that? Well, one of my clients, Dan, who's really just an amazing mind. And that's what I love about him. He actually started reading this book, Working Backwards, Inside Stories and Secrets from Inside Amazon by Colin Breyer and Bill Carr. And, it's the interesting thing about reading business books is that, this book is 270 pages, thereabouts. It takes a lot of time to go through 270 pages. So you want to basically try and skim it and sort of get to what the heart is. So I did a little search and I found an article written by, as you said, a software engineer who is currently working at Amazon and basically was talking about his perspectives about the 14 Amazon leadership principles that currently the company runs on. Now, I'm always fascinated by how companies grow. And way back when I started my company, Netland, there was a software company called Cheyenne Software. And they started out I think at the end of maybe the first few months, there were 12 people. And then by the end of the year, there were 300. And it fascinated me. How do you grow a company from 12 people to 300 in 1 year? And not only do that, but do it successfully because they were quite successful. So I've always had that passion. I've always had that curiosity. And so when I saw the book that Dan had recommended and I got it and I started reading these 14 principles, I said, this bears a lot of conversation, which is why I mentioned it to you. And then when I found this article by the software engineer who explained what the impact of these principles were on him personally, I was just fascinated by it. So that's the whole backstory. So where would you like to start on the front story?
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the things that's interesting is to look at how an organization has its principles, its values, and how they relate not only on an organizational or a macro level, but also to this person as an individual. Right. And what people take away with it. Because, that's either where things can be very successful, or things sometimes will get stuck in the mud, so to speak. The first thing that is written here is customer obsession, is being concerned with serving the customer. And there's Jeff Bezos has been quoted multiple times about just being obsessed, crazy with serving the customers, and how that trickles down through the rest of the organization. Because a lot of people that are more in the line work, are they thinking about the customer, or are they just thinking about that task that they're working on?
Well, actually, it goes to the start. It goes to the very premise of starting a company. Basically, we start a company and we're thinking of ourselves. We're not necessarily thinking of the customer and sort of what is their experience. We want to think about what is our experience in going outward. And I think the key in this customer obsession, which is very much one of the very first principles, is basically working backwards, which is the title of the book, because that's where they're starting from. They're not starting from, gee, I have a business, I have something that I want to deliver to you. It's really, what does the customer really want? And then going from there. It's an interesting perspective. And then if that's the case, that's where you start the customer experience. Then everyone in your company, starting from the very top to your, what I'll call your weakest link, has to basically share that same obsession.
Let me ask you this, Michael, because I know one of the things you're passionate about is helping entrepreneurs become CEOs. Is how do people make that pivot or turn that corner from I started the business for myself and really kind of focus on that, to having that wider view involving the customers?
Well, if things aren't going well, they're certainly going to ask that. They're certainly going to look at that. But even if things are going well, they're going to ask that. I mean, inevitably, no matter where you start along that timeline of, say, starting your own company, at some point, you've got to ask, what is the customer experience? The sooner you realize what the customer experience is like, and the sooner you deal with that, I think the chances of success are that much greater. If things aren't going well, so why aren't things going well? Well, again, what's going on with your customer experience? If things are going well and you want to get better or you want to grow, where are you going to start with? What's that customer experience like? And how can you give a better one? How can you dive deeper into it? Or how can you expand it? Or what are other services that you can offer to amplify that customer experience? And I think we lose sight of that. All too often we lose sight of it. We think of, what do we want to do rather than what do we want our customer to do? What do they want? I don't know if that answers your question, but, when I'm doing my business consulting, I'm going to ask the very first question is, what do you think your customer experience is like?
Right. And I think that could be a tough nut to crack for a lot of entrepreneurs, especially first-time entrepreneurs, is, there's this vision of, we're going to make this widget that everybody's going to love and everybody's going to use in a certain way. And how's it being received? Are they using it? They might be using it in a way you never envisioned, and that could be more profitable and more successful than the first go. I mean, it's like Amazon. They were books originally, and now there's pretty much nothing you can't order, to get delivered from them nowadays.
Well, I think he knew that. He knew that books was just a starting point.
Right.
It wasn't that he discovered it after having success with delivering books. He knew that was just a starting point. And he did, actually, reading the book, you realize how much research he did to really understand that was a good starting place. Right. And that actually goes to another point. How much research do we do before we enter a marketplace? Sometimes we don't do any research. We just go in and we do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's an interesting contrast to Steve Jobs.
Yes.
Whereas
he's fascinating. Yes.
Yeah.
So, in the marketing 101, you typically say, well, what does my target want? And yet Steve Jobs basically turned it around and said, I'll tell the market what they want.
Right.
Right. But that is actually, that happens. So there's no one way. I mean, Bezos did the same thing. I'll tell the market what it wants.
Mm-hmm.
Jobs said, I'll tell the market what it wants.
So is the key a black turtleneck and jeans and white sneakers, or?
No. I think that Jobs did the research too.
Yeah.
I think even if you're going to tell the market what it wants, you're still going to do the research. You're going to say, what is the gap? What's missing?
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I was in that technology industry when I would say that the technology industry, the modern technology industry, started around the 80s, the late 70s, when personal computer became a factor in the marketplace. You no longer had to depend on the mainframe, right? But now you had a personal computer. And then we were able to take the personal computer and connect it to the mainframe. Then we were able to basically build networks where peer-to-peer networks where computers actually connected to one another. And then we built a network where we had servers that basically all the data stored so that everybody on a wired type of network could actually bring all of their files to that one place. So things began to emerge. So now in the technology industry, the data folks, the IT, information technology people in charge, basically said, well, we're going to be in control and we're going to tell everybody how the technology works. Of course, now what Jobs understood was, just what you said earlier in the conversation, not everybody was doing it the same way. And he realized that. So he basically democratized, made a democracy about the utilization of technology. It now was no longer in the hands of the IT director. It was in the hands of the user, hence the iPhone, that basically, and of course, with the advent of the internet, everything changed. But, in a sense, Jobs did his research to understand it was the user that had the power. It was the actual application that was the power. It wasn't the director of technology who was in charge of the platform telling everybody this is the way you should do it.
Right. And the other thing I think was interesting, talking about Jobs again, and also how this applies to Amazon or other organizations, is the evolution of an idea. Like Apple was not really first in anything they did.
No.
But they made it better.
Well, no, I'm not even sure about that. In the early days, I sold against the Apple. The Apple Basic was a closed system. Mm-hmm. Right? And still is. But they put the power into the user's hand.
Right.
That was hands, and that was really the issue.
Well, and you mentioned like the Rio player nowadays, which was like one of the early music players, MP3 players. Nobody knows what that was. iPod came in there and just like obliterated, that market. And with really the iTunes store, they made it easy to get the music and put it on the device. But
if we bring this back, let's bring this back, the Jobs and the Bezos, the Google guys, that's a whole other world. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that they're not listening to our podcast.
Never know.
No, Jobs certainly is not.
Jobs not, no.
But probably the folks that are listening to our podcast are saying, okay, so how does this relate to me? Mm-hmm. I'm a small business owner. You're a business coach. You're a communication expert. How does this relate to me? And I think the principles themselves are what relates. I mean, for instance, ownership. So that means that basically everybody in the company, no matter how small that company is, everybody has to own up. Everybody has to have a level of accountability, a level of ownership.
Right.
So if you have people in your organization that are not owning up, then you have a choice. You either manage to train them, educate them, and work with them so that they own up, they are accountable, or they leave, or they go, or you say, I'm not sure that we're the fit that is going to make this company go. So I think ownership is one of his basic principles, and I think that it goes to accountability at every level.
Right. Well, in addition to the accountability part, I think is the decision-making, aspect of it too. One of the principles in here is hiring the best.
Yes.
And then the flip side of it is getting rid of people when they're not working. And a lot of organizations will drag their feet at, making that decision.
Well, the hardest decision that a small business owner, entrepreneur, CEO has is basically letting people go.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, I don't. It's not a simple task. Should be on some levels, but I think as a business consultant and a coach dealing with business entrepreneurs, I think the greatest difficulty of decision they have is letting people go who are no longer right for the organization. And that principle there is, everything that you've done to get to a place in time, which has worked with the people in the company that you've had. Now you want to get to the next level. It may become very apparent that some of those people are not going to help you get to that next level. But what do? Can you retrain those folks? Can you educate them? Can you make them help you get to the next level? And if you can't, then you do have to make the decision to let people go. The difficulty is that about their private lives. That they're human beings. They have expenses. That if you let them go, if you fire them, what are they going to do? And so you get involved. Tough decisions. The
Right.
reality is you're not responsible for their life. If you feel that you're responsible for their life, well, maybe you shouldn't be a business person. Maybe you should be a priest or a rabbi. But it's like it's you can't take that on, that responsibility. You have to be fair and a good person, but it's not your responsibility.
Yeah, I think that's where a good number of people get tripped up too. I was actually having this discussion with another colleague about 2 weeks ago, whereas, we're family. They weren't related to anybody. And there was definitely some issues that they were having inside the organization, about 15-person company, fairly, small. But his perspective was everybody's family. We treat everybody like family. And, but you're not. And like you're saying, if you're not in a position to make that decision, however painful it could be, it's definitely, unless someone does something wrong and gives you cause, that's a completely different, breed of cat. But
that, it's an interesting thing. Part of the culture in a small company is to embrace the fact that you are a family. You're all working together. You all have a singular purpose. You're all rowing the boat in the same direction. But ultimately, the family expands. And I'm not necessarily talking about a family business. I'm talking about a business where no one is related, but it's still, everybody feels like a family. Mm-hmm. And yet, in any family, there are people who pull their weight and the people who don't. And then difficult decisions have to be made. My partner, Matt, fired his brother. My partner, Matt, was in business prior to he and I getting together. And when he had hired his brother and he had to fire him. So, But
yeah,
I've had to let people go in the past that I really was very close to and really liked. They weren't the right person in the right seat for getting the company to move to the next level. And there is actually bringing some other folks in. Gino Wickman has written a book called Traction, which is part of the Entrepreneurial Operations System, and he talks about the concept of RPRS, which is right person, right seat, and again, that goes to that's a very important principle. And in a sense, it's not unlike one of the Amazon principles, which you said is hire and develop the best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The flip side of that too is the responsibility of the decision maker doing the hiring. Is, if there's not a fit or something, it's easy I think it's probably a human reaction to blame the other person or other party versus, what was the decision making? What was the role that the hiring person made? Where did they fall short or make a mistake?
Yeah, I think one of the principles here is, part of that is hire and develop the best. But I think it was also, what I'm missing. I think ownership. I think, in that hiring process, you have to take ownership.
Mm-hmm.
That goes to that. But I will tell you, I know we've got about 20 minutes in, probably maybe go another few minutes more, because we don't know if we can keep everybody's interest, because maybe they want to come back. I hope they come back. We'll be talking more about this. But I'll tell you the thing that I think is really critical in hiring people. And that is, you hire people who are curious,
Mm-hmm.
who want to learn. And I think, I've hired many salespeople in the past and currently, hired salespeople in my company, and then hire them for clients as a consultant and a coach. And I think that the key is finding people that are forever want to learn and are forever curious.
Right.
I think that is such an important thing. And I think people sort of have gone to college, or they've gone to high school, they've gone to college, and they're finished with their education. And if you find people in your company who basically feel they finished with their education, then I can tell you that those people are not right for your company.
Right.
No one is ever finished their education. Every day is a learning experience. And every day you have to be open to and be curious. Read a book, read an article, ask the why, just want to understand how it works, why does it work, and do it better if you can.
Absolutely. And, this is one of the reasons why we're, doing this podcast, and more down the road, we can, expand on some of these topics. There's still a lot more that we haven't even touched on, and you're talking about, again, it's ownership and, making the right decisions, and how much of that is driven by organizations and leaders understanding who they are, like what their meaning is of being in business, and how that translates into their decisions. That's like even as simple as a project. When people don't know why they're sitting there working on something, if it hasn't been communicated clearly and their interests are not, in line with the bigger interest, it doesn't have to be 100%, but it has to be enough that it's that they're contributing and making a difference. And when leaders don't make that right first step, it can, impact all these other factors, the ownership, emphasizing learning. Everybody likes to say you have to learn. But then how do they back it up? Do they provide the time? Do they provide the resources? And things like that. But this has been a great, touch on just these topics. We'll have a link to these in the show notes as well. I hope it's looks like it's a little sunnier there than here. And I hope you're having a great Wednesday there, Michael. Anything you'd like to add as we wrap up today?
I just had a thought that went in and out of my head. Let's see. That's funny. It was.
Well, and that's the thing, is like when we go back and we look at these different topics, and we touch on the other ones, and the books that we'll mention as well, the ones that have really helped us shape what we're doing, why we do it, and there's so many treasures around us that we get too busy. I think that's one of the dangers in getting back to normal that we face in business or society, is getting back to normal too often was getting back to being too busy and not dealing with people, appreciating people like we were right at the start of the pandemic, and still doing that learning. Take 20 minutes, 30 minutes a day to read something along that. How much I love books and libraries. And it's just kind of like breaking on that, and everything that was normal, maybe we don't have to get back exactly to the way we were doing it before.
Yeah, it's true. So I now know what the thought was, and maybe it should be something that business is not a Nike commercial.
Just do it.
Right. That I think that that's really that goes to the heart of it. That goes to the point about training and educating and so on and so forth. Is if a business owner say, "Well, just do it," there's no such thing. So business is not a Nike commercial.
That was one of the things that really resonated, and I won't go too much down a rabbit hole here, but the bias for action is, when I saw that, it's like a lot of IT that people are familiar with are business systems. So if you mess it up, it's not a real catastrophe usually. But like if you're working on like aviation systems or medical devices, stuff like that, you don't want to just do it for sure in the technology world from that perspective. And, as you mentioned earlier, it's the human element. A successful leader doesn't want to be in a position where he or she has to let somebody go because they made a mistake or they made a miscalculation.
Yeah, that's true. But, actually, we have just 2 more minutes or so.
Sure.
The interesting thing about the bias for action is one of the things is ask for forgiveness, not for permission. That we should talk about that, because that's an interesting challenge on both sides. In other words, you're the leader, and you say, "I want you to do it this way." It frightens people if they want to try and do it another way, so they don't. So you get your way, but you don't necessarily get the way it should be. And so you want people to basically have a bias for action. So it's we'll talk more about that. That should be a fun thing to really get into, because that gets into how you lead or how you don't lead.
Yep.
We could do that next topic.
Absolutely, and that connects to one of the other topics that I look forward to discussing is the delivering results part. Is how much is that key to you're delivering the result, and maybe you're painting outside the lines, but you're getting it done, or is it a highly regulated environment where maybe that's not such a good idea? So,
and also the ROI, return on investment, is part of that too, because that's an external approach. So
yep.
we got more stuff to talk about and have some fun.
Well, Michael, thank you very much for joining me today. Look forward to our next discussions and our next time together here on the Meaningful Communication Show.
Absolutely. Well, I hope everybody has enjoyed it when they listen to it, and reach back to us. Voice of Reason Consulting is my website. I am LinkedIn, Michael Gansl. You can find me easily enough on LinkedIn, and through the show, if you have some questions, Chad and I will be delighted to respond.
Yep, and links will be in the show notes. Thank you all very much, and we'll talk to you next time.
Bye-bye.